গত ৫ ফেব্রুয়ারি আমরা বাংলাদেশের ঢাকার মোড়ে গণসমাবেশ ঘটতে দেখি। ৫ জন দিয়ে শুরু হয়, ৫,০০০ ছাড়িয়ে ৫০,০০০ ছাড়িয়ে লাখে পৌঁছয়। তরুণ তরুণীরা আসতে থাকেন। যে মানুষটি কখনো কোনো আন্দোলনের সাথে যুক্ত থাকেন না বা ছিলেন না, সেই প্রান্তিকেও কিন্তু আমরা এই শাহবাগ মোড়ে আসতে দেখি, উপস্থিত হতে দেখি, একত্রিত হতে দেখি এবং সংহতি প্রকাশ করতে দেখি। যারা শারীরিকভাবে আমরা শাহবাগে যেতে পারিনি, তারা মানসিকভাবে চেতনার দিক থেকে শাহবাগের সাথে সংহতি প্রকাশ করতে দেখি। কেন শাহবাগের মোড়ে এই যে গণজাগরণ ঘটছে, এই যে তরুণ তরুণী এবং বৃদ্ধ বৃদ্ধা শিশু, এই সমস্ত মানুষের যে সমাবেশ ঘটছে, এত বড় এত বিশাল সমাবেশ বিশ্বে খুব কম নজির আছে এরকম এত বড় সমাবেশের। কেন ঘটছে? কিসের টানে, কোন চেতনা স্ফুরণে, কোন দাবির প্রশ্নে মানুষ একত্রিত হচ্ছেন শাহবাগের মোড়ে? আজকে আমাদের এই বিষয়টি নিয়ে আমরা কথা বলবার প্রয়াস পাবো, মূল্যায়ন করবার প্রয়াস পাবো এবং বিশ্লেষণ করবার প্রয়াস পাবো যে শাহবাগ আমাদের জন্য কি অর্থ বহন করে, কোন চেতনায়, এই শাহবাগের কোন চেতনায়, যে চেতনার আলো ছড়িয়ে পড়তে আমরা দেখি বাংলাদেশের প্রত্যন্ত অঞ্চলে এবং বাংলাদেশ ছাড়িয়ে বিশ্বের যেখানেই বাংলাদেশের বাঙালিরা বসবাস করুক না কেন, এই চেতনার আলো তাদেরকেও না ছুঁয়ে পারে না। রায়হান রশিদ, তিনি একজন আইনজীবী, একাডেমিক, অ্যাক্টিভিস্ট, ব্লগার এবং তার চাইতেও সবচেয়ে বড় পরিচয় তিনি ICSF এর মেম্বার। Thank you so much, Rayhan, for coming to our studio today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. এবং আমাদের সাথে আছেন, I'm very honored and to say that Salil Tripathi, he's here. He's a London-based writer and he's currently researching a book on 71, the War of Independence and its aftermath. Simple question: what does it mean to you? What does Shahbag means to you?
I see it as an outsider, of course, and as a well-wisher of the people of Bangladesh.
Yes.
And what I see it as a genuine desire for justice, genuine quest for justice. I think there are two remarkable things about it, and I'll come to them one after the other. One is that a lot of people that we see at Shahbag are all under 40. So this whole idea that this is a movement about the past, that people are trying to settle old scores, is technically not true.
Not true.
Because the people who are asking for justice, and let's talk about the justice part first, are people who have only heard these stories. And how have they heard these stories? They've seen the photograph in their house of somebody who had died under circumstances that they still do not have answers for, and they want some answers for that. Or they want to know what happened to the uncle who was helping people who were coming and staying in their house in the 1970s during the 9-month period, and then suddenly he disappeared, just as those little young men also disappeared at that time, and they want to know things like, so they want those answers, and those answers have been denied to the people. Now they've been denied to the people because of a gross political failure at every level, and I think there's a huge body of opinion that wants that answer, wants that justice, wants that sense of closure. Now that is one part of it, and the other, which I think is a truly remarkable part of it, is that if one were to see it as an opposition to what the politics that Jamaat-e-Islami represents, then it's a very remarkable aspect, because it's one of the few times that I can think of in recent history that in a largely Muslim country, Muslim by faith, I mean,
yes, 90% of
yes. Largely Muslim country, people are actually rising against a party that claims to speak for Muslims. Now that's truly remarkable. Whether that's a good or bad thing is a different issue. We can debate that.
Yeah.
But it's really remarkable that this is happening. Those are the two very noteworthy aspects about this.
Shahbag represents something that was always there. It was the creed for justice. And this creed for justice, it was there in our public psyche, in our public life, in our political life, since 1971, because probably there is no reason to repeat what happened in 1971, the kind of atrocities. The people died, 3 million, women raped, 400,000, people displaced, 10 million. So those are the statistics, and in our mind, they are more than statistics, because when an atrocity happens, it should be remedied. There should be some kind of form of justice. People need redress, and without that, we cannot move on. Salil already just mentioned the word closure. That is what we also need, because with the culture of impunity, if it exists, that is going to block every effort of progress in our country. Now we see people paying bribes, the corruption we see. I think behind all those things, that is the culture of impunity that began from 1971. Because if crimes at that scale are not prosecuted, or if the criminals are not punished, bribing, corruption
is nothing.
These are nothing. That is one thing. And the other thing about Shahbag is, well, it's a very spontaneous uprising, and it's a revolution. It is getting. Well, I don't use the word revolution. I would say uprising, and it is spreading. It's spreading like a wildfire. What are the characteristics of Shahbag? Well, it is peaceful. It is secular. It is gender balanced. Just 3 days ago, you probably have heard that a group of young men, they started walking from Oldham.
Yes.
They call it the
Yes.
Walk for Justice.
Walking for justice. Yes.
Walking for Justice.
Yeah.
And they're coming, they're well, it has been snowing for the last 2 days, and they're walking 170 miles. That's their plan. They're coming towards Downing Street.
Yes. On
And
the 26th.
with a single demand.
Yes.
The demand is for justice. And now this walk, if we see it, this walk has actually, this walk is even longer than 170 miles, because it has been going on for the last 42 years. So that is the kind of walk it is. It is not just 170 miles that is now Oldham to Downing Street. People of Bangladesh, they have been walking for the last 42 years. 42 years. So that's what Shahbag is, and Shahbag is not new. What it represents, it had represented even in the past. We saw it in the early 90s with the uprising during the Gano Adalat, like the people's trial of Ghulam Azam. Well, that
Through
was a civil
Jahannair Imam.
Through Jahannair Imam, led by Jahannair Imam, and that was a symbolic trial. That was a trial led by the civil society. That is the first instance, and the next instance was we saw the uprising immediately before the Awami League government came to power in 2008. It was first. It was not a political demand. It was the demand of the young generation. They wanted that we want justice. We want justice for 1971, the genocide, and all that happened. And the realization is always there that without this redress, without justice, we cannot move on as a nation. That is the thing young generation felt, realized, so they exerted. And fortunately, Awami League government at that point, they actually were able to assimilate that demand into their electoral agenda, and hence, and that was reflected in the landslide victory.
People do ask that what is happening in Shahbag right now. Is it dying down? What is happening with the uprising or movement? Can you shed a light on this?
The first thing, well, Shahbag is in the Shahbag Square in the middle of Dhaka, and it is not only in Dhaka. On the contrary, actually, it is spreading. Well, it has already spread all over Bangladesh and all of the major cities. And those in every city there are Ganojagaran Moncho, and they're doing a lot of work. Unfortunately, all of them do not come to the media. And what about Shahbag abroad? Because Shahbag is spreading like wildfire. Today is 24th, and there is an event in 126 cities. So it's spreading like wildfire. I just mentioned the person who is walking from Oldham to here.
Yes.
Just before this program, I've been to Brighton. There is a Ganojagaran Moncho event. People in Brighton, they just gathered in a Sunday afternoon, and they were talking about Shahbag and what they can do and how they feel about justice in 1971. So instead of dying down, I think the actual picture is just the opposite. And at this stage, people are more thinking of the legacy of Shahbag, or the legacy of justice, where this movement is going to lead. Now people are actually getting their heads together. They're thinking more deeply where this movement will go, what role they would play. I think it is getting even more serious to them. So it's not a fad. It's not something just like people are interested today and forgetting about it tomorrow. It's not like that. It's just the opposite.
So, and I know that you've been writing about Bangladesh, and you are going to write a book about Bangladesh. So, did Shahbag kind of help you mold your some concepts or some thoughts, or what did Shahbag do to you?
It excited me to start with, because there has been this undercurrent of feeling about justice that I've sensed, and I've interviewed more than 300 people in the country, which is nothing in a nation.
You've been to Bangladesh
about half a dozen
year.
times
Yes.
in the last 2 years,
Yes.
and each time at least 2 weeks, sometimes for a month. So I've spent a lot of time there, and it's not just Dhaka. I mean, I've been to remote villages like Noakhali and the Char region, and I've been to Chuknagar, and I've been to Khulna, Jessore. I mean, you name it. I mean, really tiny places. Some of them have been where I've spent time in talking to ordinary people. And the one thing that comes through that, no matter what their solution would be of what they want from it, whether it is death penalty or forgiving them or just life imprisonment, but the desire for justice is uniform. I don't think I met a single person anywhere at any stage who's a neutral person, not a party official, who's a neutral person, who said that no, these trials, let bygones be bygones and let move on. That nobody has said, particularly if the person is a lay person, an average person, and not a politician or not a journalist and not an academic who is meant to think about these things. So it's a genuinely a people's movement in that level, or people's desire.
His question was whether the people has committed contempt of court.
Yes. Yes.
By people he meant Shahbagi.
Shahbag.
Well, the Shahbagi people, they are not from Moon, they are not from Mars. They are from Bangladesh, and they have an opinion, and it is the majority opinion that was reflected as mentioned earlier, that in the last general election. Well, people are entitled to their opinion, to accept or reject a finding of the court, and that has got nothing to do with honoring a judiciary or honoring a justice system. On the contrary, the people in Shahbag, they said that we have faith in the justice system, we have faith in the tribunal. However, we do not agree with this judgment,
with this verdict. Yes.
And why? Because it is there. At the end of the day, justice is people getting what they deserve, and the people thought they didn't. Mr. Kader Mullah, who was convicted and sentenced, he didn't get what he deserved. So it is the people's perception. So he can argue that that perception is wrong or right, but that doesn't change anything. That is people's perception, and that is public opinion, and that is what people's expectation of justice is. I think that is as simple as this. There is no reason to mix those two things up.
Okay, the caller was asking that the verdict, when the judge gave the verdict, he had analyzed everything, and he had gone through the both sides, and then he gave that verdict. So when people came at Shahbag and voiced their concerns and protested that verdict, did they kind of
commit contempt of court?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, that depends on how you define contempt of court in Bangladesh. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a Bangladeshi, and I'm not an expert on contempt of court proceedings. So I can't really say that. So if we were to accept the fact that what people in Shahbag are doing are expressing their disapproval, then that's fine. But if that leads, and there are lots of ifs in what I'm going to say as it follows, but if that leads to the government then demanding a change in the law, if that leads to a verdict that is deliberately given out to placate the view from Shahbag, then that would be wrong. It has to be by the law, it has to be based on the evidence that the court has heard in the court. That is how it should be.
Yes.
Now, if there is, otherwise what is the difference between mob justice and court justice? So to that extent the concern is a valid one, and I think before we met, we were talking a little bit about what the human rights community and other international organizations are wondering about. That is their primary concern, that they want the process to be very clear, very transparent, and very pure, because then after that, if you come up with a verdict which is very harsh, it will have greater standing and credibility than otherwise.
Yes.
Can I
yes,
add
of
something? From the last caller and from Sheril's comment, you just cannot have both at the same time. At the one hand, this caller, he thinks that the tribunal, they are prudent enough. He thinks that, and the tribunal, they are very fair. They know what they are writing, what their judgment. That is, and to justify Abdul Qadir Mullah's verdict, he's willing and he's prepared to uphold the tribunal, to support the tribunal. Then what about the other cases?
Right.
Other cases, they're the same people. Well, I'm not saying that same caller, but there are others who are saying that this tribunal is not good. And they find 100 different faults. So you can't have it both way. Just they have to make up their mind what they want to say. Number one. And number two, Salil raised a very interesting point. That is the difference between mob justice and real justice. Well, a few days ago, you know that in Delhi, about the case of the woman who was raped, and there was, I think, widespread and I think unanimous call for death penalty. Like
Yes.
that, people took to streets of India, and that people can call whatever they want. People can demand whatever they want. That is not going to change the course of the judiciary, course of the decision of the court, how the things are decided. In this instance, what government did? The government, he can argue, well, he can say that, one can say that that certain laws have been changed. What law has been changed? Particularly the appeals law has been changed. Now we have to look at how the appeal laws were before the change, because now it is very clear that before these recent amendments, the appeal laws were actually unequal. It is the defense team of the tribunal. They have been calling all the time that there has to be equality of arms, that both parties should have the
power,
same footing, or same kind of rights and same kinds of obligations before the court and same facilities. So if there is there was any difference between that, I think that should have been that should be remedied, and that remedying that shouldn't be a question of shouldn't be criticized. But yes, of course, I would also be concerned if Shahbag actually influences the outcome of the verdicts.
Yes.
That would be one thing, but that is something that needs to be seen, because the international human rights community, what they're saying, they're saying without giving the court their own chance, because at the end of the day, it is the court who are going to decide on this, and they're going to apply the law. So it is up to the courts, and let's see how it goes.
Yes,
because changing law is one thing. That still that is just remedying an imbalance that existed in the law. That's just that is the thing. That's it.
But the changing the law did happen after Shahbag, though.
Yes. Well, there are many provisions have changed even before Shahbag. This law has been amended a few times before, since from 2009 and a few days before Shahbag, it has been changed. But and interestingly, from ICSF, we have been calling for the change, particularly in the appeals provision. We actually pointed out, we spotted that there is a difference in the appeals procedure. We thought that it doesn't make sense. We thought that there is an ambiguity, and we were correct. And we wrote our briefing papers, and that was our position. And we are glad that actually government is actually remedying that difference, with or without Shahbag. That doesn't matter. A good thing has been done, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Okay, and but I have a very kind of a broad question. Sometimes we do see, not in this instance, I'm not saying, but sometimes we do see that if any kind of atrocity happens, like rape, what happened in Delhi, then law and then the law do kind of change. So it's not that the for the voice of the community or voice of the people, but the state realized that law should change, or we should have legal law for this kind of atrocities, or for this or for that. So if that happens, can we say that it's a creation of mob justice?
No, I mean, we are confused. I mean, I'm happy to talk about the Delhi rape case here.
I know.
But my point is that even there were already very harsh laws in place anyway. And the demands that came out were of two types. Okay? There were types which were basically for death penalty, which was one demand. but there were also other demands which were very women friendly, that women should not have to go through intrusive examinations, or when they are being interrogated or in a question at a police station, a woman police officer has to be there. A lot of these things are not there, which is the reason women don't go out and to complain in India, and it's probably similar in the subcontinent. I mean, it's a subcontinent problem, not an Indian problem. So I think that way the report that came out, which was from Justice Verma in India, actually tried to bring all those things, all the deficiencies, and pointed them out at that time. And I think that was a good thing. Here, I mean, if what Rayhan is saying is indeed the case, that there were these presentations already made, the optics look very bad. That when the presentations were made, the government did nothing about it, but suddenly in Shahbag the demand comes, and the next day the Prime Minister asks for it, and then the Jatiya Samsad looks into it right after that, and then you have the law has been amended, and then after that, let's assume for a moment that in the appeal he does end up getting the death penalty. Then for those who want to connect the dots, it becomes very simple to say that this was mob justice. So the onus will be extremely strong and high as such on the judges to demonstrate their independence from what the crowds are demanding. So in fact, it has made the problem more acute than it was otherwise.
What if, that's my question to Salil, what if just it's a hypothetical question, what if the judges find that Mr. Kader Mullah's verdict verdict was not sufficient, and they increase the sentence? Will people just instantly put 2 and 2 together and say that, oh, this is what we say, this is mob justice? I think that would be, in all fairness to the victims of 1971, that would be oversimplification, because mob justice is justice if these convicted war criminals, they were handed over to Shahbag so that they are hanged in the middle of Dhaka city. That's not happening.
No, that's true. I think what will be necessary, assume for a moment that the punishment is indeed increased, then the onus will be again on the judge to come up with such good reasoning to reassure everybody that this is not because of.
In the same length, what if just because that if one certain judge feels that he have to show that it is not mob justice, and then he going without his good judgment, he reduces a sentence and releases someone. How would you say that?
Well,
how do you see that?
That's the reason why, if we look at the murti of justice, it's blind, and there's a scale.
So what should
in the
people
hand.
do? They shouldn't demand anything.
No, people have the right to express their opinion, of course, in democracies. So people should express their opinion, but the judges should be driven by the evidence before them, the law of the land, and the precedent that is at hand, and they should not be swayed by emotions.
I hope they
That's
won't
my
be.
point.
Yes, I hope that they won't be, because it works both ways.
Yeah, of course it does.
If a judge, for example, there will always be allegation that judges have increased because of Shahbag, or there will always be allegation that judges have decreased the punishment because of Shahbag. But that puts us in a very difficult situation, because what Shahbag did is a spontaneous movement, and with a singular agenda, that they want justice. And what are they supposed to do? They should think all the possibilities and all the eventualities, all the contingencies, and they just do nothing. They can't do that, because it's an uprising. No one decided that Shahbag would happen. Shahbag just happened.
Yeah. Like, the people who don't believe in death penalty, they are all for justice, for these war criminals. They want justice just as anyone. But when Shahbag asked that we want death penalty for these war criminals, they felt uncomfortable and uneasy to go all the way with Shahbag. What do you have?
Well,
how do you see that?
The one demand in Shahbag is the demand for death penalty. Now, we can see that demand in two ways. We can see it literally, or we can see it
symbolic,
or we can look at what it actually means. What it actually means is people are demanding highest punishment for the convicted. Now, the highest punishment of the land happens to be death penalty. In Bangladesh, you know that a person gets death penalty even for one murder. What about genocide? What about mass murders and crimes against humanity? So it is the reality that the country's current status of the criminal justice system, it averts death penalty that exists in the country. So that is the essence of Shahbag's demand, that people are demanding highest punishment. If you look at the posters and placards of Shahbag, like Shahbag template movements in all other cities in the world, you'll see that people are actually clarifying what they mean by
maximum
death penalty.
punishment.
They actually put the word maximum punishment. That is the reason. Now, that is one way to look at it. That is one explanation. The other thing is, death penalty is not mandatory in in the ICT's law. Okay, ICT's law requires that the judges will award punishment according to the gravity of the crime. Of course, and in doing so, the judges will take into account the evidence and the arguments of both the parties. And end of the day, these are very competent judges, because they are very senior judges, because most of them are either from the Supreme Court of Supreme Court status, like they are eligible to be appointed in the Supreme Court, or they are actually from Supreme Court. Now they are sitting in the tribunal. So these are very competent judges. When they make their judicial mind, well, I have to trust their mind. Who else we are going to trust? Because they are the highest, most senior and the most competent judges in the country. So they are sitting in judgment. They are sitting trial. In no other court in Bangladesh, you know, whatever happening is ICT. It is a trial court. It is acting as a trial court. No other court in Bangladesh, judges with such seniority sits in trying in the trial court. So that is where the judgments are coming from. And with death penalty, there is another thing. One may or may not agree with death penalty. Well, we can have a discussion on that. But in order to change death penalty for war criminals, we have to look at a couple of things. Because with death penalty, if we want to abolish the death penalty, that means we have to change and overhaul our whole criminal justice system. Now, my question would be, why should the ICT cases or the cases of the war criminals, why should they be used as a guinea pig or as a test case for abolishing death penalty, and why now? Because a couple of years ago, the British High Commissioner who was attacked in Sylhet when he was there, Ambassador Anwar Choudhury, and the people responsible, they have been awarded death penalty. And at that time, even the Western press, even the British press, even Amnesty actually, they didn't actually condemn that death penalty. Just because the law permits death penalty, as other laws in Bangladesh do the same way. In fact, there are a couple of dozen laws in Bangladesh which actually permit death penalty.
I heard that hundreds actually.
Yes.
I don't know whether it's true or not.
Well, I have to go through that exact number. So, just because some law has death penalty, it just doesn't automatically become that law doesn't automatically become tainted because of that. Now the question is how that law is applied and by whom it is applied. And I just explained that the tribunal, which is a very competent tribunal constituted by the most senior judges. And I was also telling that people, when there are instances when there had been the death penalty in Bangladesh, and the British press and the other international civil society actors, they didn't actually pick up those death penalties. They didn't criticize. They didn't find anything wrong. Interestingly, there is one person, that is a U.S. ambassador for war crimes, Mr. Stephen Rapp. I remember his comments on the ICT. One of his bone of contention was that ICT awards death penalty. Can I quote something from him? Interestingly, what he said in another instance.
Yes, of course.
So when talking about ICT or the war criminals of 1971, I saw a tendency that people are very critical about death penalty, and they just find it as a weapon or as a tool to undermine the process. Whereas the same, and that was done by Mr. Rapp. And interestingly, when talking about Saddam's death penalty, he actually defended the process.
Okay.
Let me quote from him. He said that we have to remember, this is what he said in Manila, in a forum. We have to remember that this is a national system. He was referring to Saddam trial. It is theirs. These are their national norms. It may not be to everybody's liking, but that is the world we live in. We try to work at the national level first and foremost, and we cannot always expect it to be perfect. We want to have something that is as good as we can possibly have. That was his statement about statement about Saddam's when he was defending Saddam being awarded the death penalty. So I always maintain that whether or not we like death penalty as a concept or as a movement or as a value system, the ICT or the trial for the genocide of 1971 shouldn't be a testing ground for that. If we want to abolish it, we may, but not here, because that takes time, that takes review of our judicial, the whole criminal justice system. Let's have dialogue for that, and that should be something forward-looking, and that can and I'm all for it, no matter how long it takes. But that is going to be a long process. But suddenly, without going through the whole process, we just cannot suddenly pick the ICT and just take it as an example or as an instance to abolish death penalty, because that wouldn't make sense.
Your thoughts on
yes,
this?
I'm definitely against death penalty in all instances, even for a petty murder as well as for international crime. So that's my bias or prejudice on the table. Now, just to pick on your last point, if indeed you want to have a national dialogue, then it is incumbent that until the dialogue is sorted out, you suspend death penalty on any contemporary running cases. Otherwise, you can't undo what has happened already in the past, but you want to prevent further injustice that might happen. So just for that reason alone, I would say that it should be suspended. I mean, just on that technicality. But otherwise, I mean, the reason, I mean, I'm fully with you when you say that you should not make the ICT as a guinea pig, and you should look about it as a national, and I indeed agree with that. I do think that I mean, more and more countries which are want to be seen to be respecting human rights, want to be seen to be, in part of the so-called civilized world, do try to do away with death penalty, and which is why Scandinavian countries, Australia, New Zealand, a lot of these countries have done away with it. Of course, US has the death penalty, and I'm not trying to say that US is or is not civilized. That's not the discussion we want to have here. But I think the movement is towards abolition rather than having more and more countries having death penalty. So to go in that direction is a good thing. So if indeed there is a groundswell of opinion, then I think it is incumbent to start looking at it again, because it is a final kind of a judgment. And forget about the merits of this case alone, but just purely on the merits of death penalty itself, there's enough evidence to show that people who are vulnerable, people who are poor, people who are from minorities, people who are discriminated against are more likely to get the death penalty from a powerful court than people who have the power, who have the resources, and so on. Now, of course, this is a different case because the accused in this case are prominent political leaders, they have financial resources, and so on. So that argument does not necessarily pertain here. But in general, these are the good, sound arguments, and courts can get it wrong. There have been DNA tests which have shown that. So there's a very sound, respectable body of opinion which says death penalty is wrong, and I happen to agree with that because it's such a final punishment. You can't undo it.
Yes.
And I can see his point. He said that I think you mentioned suspension of death penalty. Basically, he's referring to having some kind of moratorium on death penalty.
That's right. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, exactly. It is definitely a very valid way to look at it. Now, I would say that, because today I'm not going to say whether I support or not death penalty. That's a totally different issue. The question is, with moratorium or with death penalty, there is no international consensus on the abolition of death penalty at the moment. That is how it stands. And a few years ago, in 2009,
I didn't know that actually.
53 countries, including Bangladesh, they actually submitted a communique before the UN, and they explained how their legal system is and why they support death penalty, or why it is a necessity for them, or it is a reality for them, if you look at it that way. And interestingly, in that moratorium, let me quote moratorium actually, in that statement, in addition to the consensus point I just explained, it was clearly stated that every state has an inalienable right to choose its political, economic, social, cultural, and legal justice systems without interference in any form by another state. So, whether or not a country will have death penalty, that is actually something that has to be decided by
By that
by
country.
particular state, and that is the building block of the international community, like the state sovereignty. It's part of sovereignty. That is one way. Salil, I'll come back to
Yeah,
you. So that is one thing, and the bottom line, it still is like that. That still there is no international consensus, at least that's at least not I am aware of, and with death penalty. Let me quote from somewhere here. It's a very interesting thing. My point would be these 53 retentionist states, the states who are actually retaining death penalty, they are also part of international community. Their voice should have some value. And I can only hope that there will be a time, there will be a perfect world. Let's imagine a world where there won't be any death penalty. But that is for the future. And another question, Salil said that we can have, so that is my argument would be against the point on having a moratorium on death penalty. But let's look at it another way. What if the government, okay, let's say, agreeing with Salil, what if the government decides that, okay, let's put a stop on death penalty until we are able to decide everything, decide where are we heading? My question would be, can the government actually do that? Because end of the day, what amounts to justice or what is justice, it centers on people's perception of justice. In a democratic society, shall we or are we going to be happy that a government is taking that level of decision on people's perception of justice, that the perception that actually gives legitimacy to laws and everything, even to the governments? Can a government do that? Because I remember a few days ago, even an MP in Britain, she issued a statement, and her statement was really bizarre. She was trying to placate her constituents. I don't say that what she is doing is the right thing, but politicians have to keep in mind that how a country's how their decision is going to be viewed, because at the end of the day they are also being judged, because their whole legitimacy depends on public opinion, and what Shahbag represents, that is public opinion.
Shahbag represents the public opinion on justice. I entirely agree with you, but I'm sure there are many people in Shahbag who are personally against death penalty too. I don't think everybody in Shahbag said phashi chai. I don't think that is a situation
Absolutely.
there. And I think that's important to note. And I agree with a lot of what you said, including the fact that there is no international consensus. But I always point out at examples like Norway, which are a heinous crime. Breivik, who went and killed all those children,
Yeah.
and still Norway did not. There were many people who did say that let's have death penalty for a crime like this, but the government stood firm that no, we are a different kind of a nation. We'll have an open trial, and we will make sure that the case is heard properly, and he will get exemplary punishment and justice. And let's put it that way. We should all aspire to such an ideal. Let's look at it that way.
Well,
Exactly.
I see Salil's point, and I actually fully share his spirit. And what probably another good thing that came out of Shahbag is at least we are having a dialogue now on this issue.
Yes.
So probably we
Yes.
can see it as a positive
Yes,
development.
absolutely.
But with Norway and in other countries, people who are critical about the death penalty in Bangladesh and death penalty for war criminals in Bangladesh, they are two different issues.
Yeah.
And with all due respect to the British civil society and other civil society actors, what happened in Bangladesh, it is probably, I would say that it is beyond them to understand.
Or
what
imagine.
happened imagine to understand.
True.
what happened.
Absolutely.
So because the Bangladeshis, throughout the history, they are known for they are known to be very peace-loving people. They are not violent. So why suddenly a peace-loving people, suddenly the whole country, they are thinking that this is the only solution, they have no other way. So that is probably another thing to think about, because a country with 3 million victims, probably there probably you will find it difficult to find a single family where there isn't a victim victim from 1971. So a country that is bearing that kind of scar, it is probably is going to be difficult to understand for citizens of other countries or the what I say the international community. But I do respect their opinion. Of course, we have to respect.
No,
their opinion.
as you, I have a call. Can I take a call and then come back to you? Hello, Shubha Shandha. Hello.
হ্যালো জি আমাদের ডিভাইনের স্টুডিও প্লিজ
আপনি স্টুডিওতে কথা বলছেন, বলুন।
জি সরি, আপনার তো টপিক হলো শাহবাগ সম্বন্ধে।
জি।
শাহবাগ মানে কি? শাহবাগ মানে আমি যেটা মনে করি, আমরা কিছু মানুষ ঘুমন্ত অবস্থায় ছিলাম এতদিন।
জি
এই শাহবাগের জাগরণ মঞ্চ থেকে আমাদেরকে জাগিয়ে তোলা হয়েছে।
জি
বাংলাদেশে 1970 যেমন স্বাধীনতায় যে অপকর্ম করেছিল কিছু মানুষ
কারা?
এই যে কিছু মানুষ বলতে স্বাধীনতা এখন পর্যন্ত যারা চায়নি, যারা এখন পর্যন্ত স্বাধীনতার বিপক্ষে কথা বলে, যারা আজ স্বাধীনতা যুদ্ধের অপরাধের কারণে জেলে বন্দী আছে, আমি ওদের কথা বলছি।
আচ্ছা,
ওদের বিরুদ্ধে যে একটা গণজাগরণ সৃষ্টি হয়েছে,
জি,
আমি
জি।
এটাকে সাধুবাদ জানাই। নিঃসন্দেহে এটা সাধুবাদ পাওয়ার যোগ্য।
জি
আর এই যে আমাদের দেশের কিছু রাজনীতিবিদরা আজকে এই গণজাগরণ মঞ্চকে নিয়ে বিভিন্ন ভাবে কথাবার্তা বলছেন, আস্তিক নাস্তিক এগুলা অনেক কিছু বলছেন। আমি ওদের উদ্দেশ্যে একটি কথা বলতে চাই, ওরাই 1993-তে জাতীয় সংসদে 30 জন সংসদ সদস্য সেই আলোচনায় অংশগ্রহণ করেছিলেন এই জামাত শিবিরের রাজনীতি বাংলাদেশ থেকে নিষিদ্ধ করার জন্য। আজকে আবার ওরা জামাত শিবিরের জন্য মাঠে নেমে পড়েছেন
জি।
যে জামাত শিবিরের রাজনীতি যেন বন্ধ করা না হোক এবং এই যুদ্ধাপরাধীদের বিচার করা না হোক। আমি ওদেরকে অনুরোধ করে বলতে চাই আর বাঙালিদের নিয়ে এই সমস্ত নোংরা রাজনীতি না করার জন্য, কারণ নোংরা রাজনীতি করতে করতে এই বাঙালিদেরকে ধ্বংস করে দেওয়া হয়েছে।
One question was, I think it was very important that one of the callers raised that opposition party is saying that all Shahbag people at Shahbag are all atheists and they don't believe in Islam. So
I've seen pictures of people praying there. I've
exactly.
seen people doing namaz there. I've seen people, I mean, I've not seen anyone doing a puja there, but I've certainly
Yeah.
seen people doing namaz at the namaz time. So, and I don't, the issue is not about atheism and secularism. I think the issue is about, what kind of a Bangladesh do you want it to be? What kind of a nation do you want?
I think that's the most important
In a
thing.
way, just to, we were talking about it earlier, at Rayar Bazaar, the famous monument for the intellectuals, there is this slogan inscribed, right? And my Bengali is poor, so pardon me for that. But Tumra je boleche Kitash Bangladesh. Basically, the question is being asked that what you fought for or what you wanted Bangladesh to say, is Bangladesh saying that now? And one could argue that the voices that we are hearing at Shahbag are trying to finally give voice to those suppressed voices which died in December 1971 on 12th and 13th of December.
Actually, I couldn't have put it better. Salil
Yes,
said it.
absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely. It has nothing to do with that. But the thing is, this is the twist. This is they want to they want to play Jamaat Islam. So
Well, in 1971, religion played a role. Religion is actually the factor that fueled genocide or the crimes against humanity. People in the East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, they were considered they are not good Muslim, or they are non-Muslims, or they are Indian agents. So the religion, but in
religion
particular,
or the use of religion.
use of religion. So
Yes.
that is what. So people who were committing genocide, they thought that they're saving Islam, and the same goes for the people who are now against Shahbag. They're thinking that they're saving Islam, and they just need to, until they can brand it.
But do you
as
really
something
believe that they're
anti-Islamic.
thinking they're saving Islam? And
Because
there's no
you
political
see,
game.
it is a challenge for me actually to get into that twisted mind.
Yeah.
Because they have to show that whatever happening in Shahbag is against Islam, so that if they can show that, they will have some kind of following, or they will be able to raise crowds and maybe who will take the streets and fight against Shahbag. So it's really bizarre.
But this kind of dilemma, this kind of
But
conflict,
don't you
we've
differentiate between
been having.
death penalty for an ordinary murderer and death penalty for
and you
for
know
a war
what,
criminal?
how I was having a conversation actually with an overseas friend, and I was like, if I need to fight, and I need to fight for against death penalty for criminals, if I need to fight against death penalty for criminals, I will fight first for common criminals
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
war criminals. That's how I justified. I know there's no justification, but you know, for Bangladeshis, for people from Bangladesh, it's hard. It's really hard. It's not that black and white. It's absolutely not, because your heart is there, and you know, you want them, want to be there with them all the way.
Because it is very easy for Mr. Rap or Mr. Faiz, with all due respect, it is very easy for them to see it in very plain black and white terms and say that this is right and this is wrong. But living with the victims, bearing the scar for 42 years, it is difficult. The situation in the ground zero is quite different.
Yeah, and one thing I would like to say, like for me, what Shahbag speed represents, it represents that in Bangladesh, where 90% population is Muslim, and they came somewhere, they are gathering somewhere, they are being united for a secular society. I think this is remarkable. This is something to be proud of. Salil, because I know that you did work with Amnesty International
8 years ago, yes.
8 years ago, and you kind of, that's why you kind of know their culture, you know, that they have human rights organizations, they have their particular culture, and we noticed that Human Rights Watch, if you say, or Amnesty, took the position that this was a political vendetta against Jamaat, because the people who were arrested, they were leaders of Jamaat, and we know that the 12 known alleged war criminals, they were actually known as war criminals in public domain for decades. It's not that government or ICT you know, arrested anyone they liked. Oh, I don't like this particular leader from Jamaat, so let's arrest that person as a war criminal. It didn't happen at all like that. So how do you see their position?
So if they were to take a very idealistic position, they would want to turn the clock back to 1972 and get the 195 people back from Pakistan. You know who I'm talking
Yes.
about, right? Yeah,
Yes.
everyone now knows that. So
Yeah.
I won't go into details of that. And it has to start there.
Yeah.
That those were the perpetrators, and then there were collaborators and partly actors. I'm not saying that the current accused may or may not be actors. I don't know the details of each case, and I wouldn't want to get into that kind of a detailed discussion. But I think that's where they would want it to start, and they would probably, a good Amnesty person and a good Human Rights Watch person today will ask the Pakistan government to go after those 195 and prosecute them even today.
Of course.
They will ask for that. I mean, to be fair to those two human rights organizations, they are not saying that because they've been
When
let
they
off.
will ask for that?
Well,
It's been 42 years.
no, I agree, but I'm just saying that that is what they ought to be doing, and they would, the right person in the organization will make such a demand. That's not the problem here. The problem is that when you have a trial which is obviously circumscribed, and you're talking about a fewer number of people, then I think to see it as a witch hunt against Jamaat is peculiar. I don't necessarily agree with that, because they will go after the people who, against whom they think that the prosecutor thinks that there is credible evidence. If they happen to be members of Jamaat, so be it. But the question would be, are they in turn not going after people who may have committed atrocities but who are not part of the Jamaat? Again, there are a couple of BNP people too, so we know that too.
And also one Awami League.
One arm.
And Awami League, yeah, I was just going to come to that.
Yes.
And there's an Awami League person too. But in an ideal reckoning scenario that you want to see, probably you want to be even more comprehensive and see that wherever there were reprisal killings against the so-called Biharis, and let's say when the innocent civilians among them were killed, then I think those should also be brought in. So if the tribunal were to be seen to be doing all of that, it will attract far less criticism. Now, I'm not saying that the tribunal is on a witch hunt necessarily, but the way the choices have been made just now, that's the way it might look.
It's very unfortunate that there were some reprisal killings against the Biharis. But what we need to understand that with the Bihari issues, they don't actually fall under the international crimes framework. I mean, crimes against humanity and genocide. Because in order to prove that, we have to show that there was a clear intent or a clear design to systematically eliminate the Biharis. Obviously, if a Bihari is killed, I'm sure that clearly falls under the framework of ordinary murders. But if it is beyond that, if there was a systematic process, systematic decision from the Mujibnagar government, we know that that doesn't exist. That never happened. On the contrary, on the contrary, what happened after the independence of Bangladesh, there were actually couple of circulars from the government to actually protect the Biharis. Hence the Bihari camp, the Geneva camp in Dhaka, in Mohammadpur. And actually government took initiatives to protect that. But did the government do a good job? Maybe not. There were reprisal killings. It happened. But that cannot actually be put under the framework of international crimes, because that is a fundamental thing we need to understand. First thing, and the second thing is what he's saying, that the process of reckoning should start with the 195 Pakistani alleged war criminals. I agree with him actually, but we also have to understand that it really doesn't make that difference, because whoever is tried here, they are not tried because of that they belong to Jamaat Islami or they belong to, because law doesn't make any difference between
specific
between a principal offender and an offender who abated, because so that is how it stands. But it would be ideal to have the Pakistani war criminals tried, and it's a good thing is the ICT has the jurisdiction to try them as well. But end of the day, whether we will get the Pakistani alleged war criminals, the living ones at least, that's a different ball game. That would be the ball game of international community and the ball game of diplomacy. I'm
I
sure.
hope that would happen in my lifetime.
In one of
my
your programs, I
lifetime.
actually discussed what happened from the Pakistani lobbying side to actually prevent UN intervention